All right. So thank you for all for your patience. Sorry, we had some connectivity issues at the get-go, but we're ready to roll now. As I said, we are Handshake, and this is our lightning lesson on making enterprise data AI ready, and it's a practical guide for teaching you how to prepare your internal data set to make the most out of it when you plug it into AI. Delighted to see you all here afternoon. It's nighttime for me as I'm in Europe, but typically I'm based out of San Francisco. People are going to continue trickling in, but I'm going to go ahead and get rolling. We already had a little bit of a delay, and I don't think it's going to miss out much if they miss intros on the who and where we're from. So as I said, we are Handshake. My name is Lev Gorlov. I'm joined here by Jeremy Kirschbaum. And what we do is we create custom AI platforms for companies, and these platforms are often off the beaten path from a typical AI application. Our companies are typically companies who want generative tools which replicate their unique voice, culture, and most of all, what we came to call knowledge craft, which is a term that is kind of difficult to define in a single sentence, but I think it's something you will get a better grasp of as we proceed through this lightning lesson. For now, I can define it as something that is at an intersection of business intelligence, tribal knowledge, so this undocumented kind of an internal, implicit way of doing things in your company, and proprietary methodologies, so the more explicit and concrete ways and instructions on how you go from raw data to insight that it has value in the market. So long story short, we build high-touch, very custom AI applications. Generative AI applications, which often involve as much consulting and discovery as they do actually building the software. And as I said, it involves a lot of reading between the lines and digging into subjective elements of what the client does. And this is kind of part of what I'm going to try to teach you how to do today. So how to not just plug in your data and call it a day, but how to really dig into the process and how you do things in order to arrive at something that is uniquely yours and really truly authentically represents how you perform things and develop insights as a company that your clients have come to cherish. And of course, everything revolves around data. And the data is really what will make your application stand out and will make it valuable in the greater market, regardless if it's an internal tool that just increases your productivity or an external tool that you offer to the general public for a price. A little historical factoid I love about the California gold rush is that in the mid-19th century when it started, few people got rich by actually finding gold. Most people got wealthy by selling shovels and pikes. To draw an analogy, generative AI specialists and developers, we're looking for gold. But it is you with your special expertise and your sphere of experience, whatever that might be, that is where the actual tools to get the gold lay. Yes, Gen AI can generate great images and slop for LinkedIn out of the box, but when was the last time there was any shortage of that on the internet? True value lies in replicating specific methodologies and ways at arriving at valuable information and replicating that at scales that no humans could have imagined. It's about taking what you already do as a human, as a team, as a company, and automating that part through generative AI, and that's where the true revolution of AI resides. It is not going to be in incumbents like OpenAI or Claude who provide the models themselves. It'll be within you and you using these tools in order to create something truly unique. And we cover how to embark on this journey and the complete kind of skill set you'll require to stick to the landing on this kind of unique service through generative AI. And unlike today's session, it's going to be 50% of actually building the things that we're covering. So it addresses data implementation and things like how to align your model's voice to the user's needs, and things like how to tune the product to make sure it's, and evaluate its output to make sure it's market ready, and so on and so forth. Today we're going to talk more about the technical element of how data gets integrated into generative AI in order to create something unique and that is personalized to you, and how to prepare your data to make sure that it does so without any flaws. So this might be a review for some of you, but for now, let's talk about the technicals of how generative AI actually handles data and gets insight to your specific data set, your Google Drive or wherever you store your information storehouse for your company. First of all, I think it'll be good to review how data plays a role in generative AI in general. It'll be a good way to talk about what we're not going to be covering today and not going to be covering in our course, and what we are going to be covering. So what we're not going to be covering is things like training the model. So using data to get from zero to a model existing, is creating a model from scratch. Very few companies actually have a reason to embark on this, and it involves an enormous amount of data. Like think the entire internet size of data in order to get it right. And we already have great models available to us, so why would you want to do that? The other part is fine tuning, which is taking a model that is already created, that is open source, downloading it on your local device, or hosting it on your own GPUs, and actually tweaking how the brain, so to speak, of the model operate. And these kind of operations are great if you want to teach your model how to speak in another language, or like speak in a certain way, like only develop movie scripts and never like deviate from the rules and logic that movie scripts or JSON or XML stick to. But truly, you can achieve all the things that you do with fine-tuning to some degree in reliability with prompting. Prompting is not changing the model itself and not making any tweaks to the model, only modifying the instructions you send to the model. So what you convey to it, and how you ask it to perform the tasks you want it to perform. And some people, this might sound a little disappointing, but I can assure you that there's a lot of power and leverage that you can achieve with prompting, especially if we consider that there's an enhanced type of prompting called RAG. Now, RAG is going to be the first and foremost method that we're going to be discussing today. And let me see here. Okay, great. Wait, let's go back here. There we go. So yeah, RAG is what we're going to be dedicating all of our attention to today, and it's a specific type of method where there's an add-on tool which injects elements of your database into the prompt of instructions which get sent to the model. So this is what a prompt for an AI application would typically look like. So up top you have some instructions on what you want the model to do. Below you have a heading and somewhere where the user's concrete specific request resides. And under that you have a section where the most relevant aspects from your database gets inserted into the prompt before it gets sent to the model. And that's what RAG is. So this is a prompt about handling customer calls for a customer call center. And you see there's it tells the model to just respond to whatever the user wants in the description, under the heading description of request. So the user might say something like, what are the what are your return policy? And it'll just shove in that exact statement, what is your return policy, under description of request. And then what RAG does is it'll look through your documents and find the elements in your data set which are most relevant to answering that question and shove them into under the heading communication manual or additional information or whatever heading you want to shove in here. It'll shove chunks out of your data set that are most relevant to the user's request under that heading, so a model will be best informed to address that specific user needs. There's an important element to this in that the model does not have access to the entirety of your database. It only has access to the most relevant pieces that it decided are pertinent to addressing that specific user's request. And this method has its strengths and weaknesses, and understanding how it works at a broad level is important in order to understand how you need to structure and organize your database in order to make this work well. So its main strength is that it's a semantic search, which means it searches for the underlying meaning under the content of your documents. It's different from pure syntax search, which is the search that you're familiar with and has been existent for many decades. Syntax search is where when you look up for the word joke, it will literally look for a combination of the letters J, O, K, and E. What you're not going to get with that kind of search is actual jokes, because it's unlikely that they have the word joke in them. Semantic search would actually identify statements like "Why did the chicken cross the road?" as a type of joke, because it understands the underlying meaning of that statement. And this is a very powerful element that RAG kind of shoves in to your application stack between the prompt and the model. So in a traditional ChatGPT, you write instructions, it gets sent to the model responds. With RAG, you write instructions to the model what you want, you send it to an intermediary step. That step looks through a data set, identifies the most relevant content in that data set, enhances and enriches your prompt with those additional insights, and then that gets sent to the model. So the search step is kind of sandwiched in between the user input, the user describing what they want, and the LLM receiving those instructions. And yeah, as I said, the key insight here is that the model does not have access to the entirety of your data set. It only has access to little snippets out of the data set that are usually like a paragraph or half a paragraph long that were identified as the most relevant. So you can think of it in the more general terms as when you provide an AI application to the user, there are 3 layers of information that the user request gets satisfied with. One is the knowledge that the model has access to directly out of the box. So something, if you just ask ChatGPT directly, it'll give you an answer. That kind of information is present and there to help the user, address the user's request. The second one is the instructions that you gave to the model about how to handle the user request. So like, is this a customer service call? What are the steps of logic on how you should process that request? What are the considerations it should have in order to address the user's needs? And the third one is this RAG method, which pulls specific tidbits out of your data set and injects them into the prompt in order to better inform the model on how to respond to the user's needs. Now, before we launch further into the how and how to organize your data set, let's cover a little bit as to the why. What are the deliverables of embarking on this journey? One I already described to you. It's it offers you AI product that is uniquely yours, and no one else but you is in a position to create the AI app quite like it, because only you have access to your unique data set. The other one is that it's kind of a necessary step in order to launch just about any AI application. So if you want to integrate AI, generative AI, into your internal processes, your external offers at any point within your company lifetime, organizing your data to fit with it is going to be a necessary step. Gartner, in a recent study, found that it expects in 2026 for 60% of AI products to be abandoned and fail, not because it didn't stick to the landing or because the LLM model was not sophisticated enough, but purely because the data on which it was working on was not properly prepared in order for it to deliver on its expectations. And the third is, of course, that you will prevent hallucinations, which means false information that is plainly wrong and the model conveys as something that is right. But there's also something a little more nuanced to it than just purely preventing wrong statements. As Jeremy, my colleague Jeremy, here likes to say, what is one person's hallucination is another religion. And this comes to show that truth is contextual, and what your user, the type of truth that your user finds most helpful might not be the type of truth that the model pays attention to right out of the box and is perfectly aligned with the user needs. So by offering specific data, you kind of become the de facto provider of an AI specialist to the market on that topic, and you create something that's unique and tailored to a specific user need, as opposed to a universal tool like ChatGPT or Claude, which tries to adhere to something that will serve anyone. But of course, creating something unique and personalized comes at a risk. Integrating your data into AI offers great power, and as we all know, with great power comes great responsibility. So, if your data is misinforming the model, then you make the hallucination problem even worse. And you can no longer say, oh, it's just the model that was making the mistake. No, you're kind of on the hook because that application is representing you. And it represents the face of your company. So let's talk about specifically what you should do to your data set in order to make sure that it is used to the utmost capacity in serving your AI app properly and making it giving it the most potential. So there are a few best practices, and I'll dedicate the rest of my time here to exploring those practices. While you'll go through this, you'll be pleasantly surprised that there's nothing crazy that you need to do your data set. In fact, many of these things you were probably going to do and been wanting to do, but kind of set on the back burner because it's not like a client-facing need. But it's kind of like a data spring cleaning that you've been probably put on your agenda anyways, and now you'll have an additional reason to do that, because it'll prepare you for AI integration down the line. So the first one is you want to pick content that is unique to your organization, which I know is probably self-evident. You don't want to provide information that is generally available online, because that's just not good use of information or real estate. But there's a little more nuance to what I mean here. By creating a generative AI applications which informs a specific subfield, you will create something that speaks specifically to your client needs. And it is also a way to be extra picky in the beginning on to what data set you'd want to start kind of prototyping and creating test applications with your app. Because the thing is about generative AI is it's kind of creative by design. And so it has no bugs in the traditional sense. A user may say that they got a wrong answer to a specific question, and then I try asking that exact same question to that exact same application, and I get the right answer, even though I did replicate the process in the exact same way. So the process is very statistical, and it's very hard to identify issues unless you try the same process many, many times. So it's always best to start with something very small, and you'd want to initially, when you build your app, you'd want to pick a data set that is and extremely insightful for your specific user, target users, and that is very unique to your organization. And once you have that sandbox, you would want to flesh out the prompt, make sure it's extracting the data correctly, make sure it's following a proper logic. And once you've got a working model, then start expanding and building out something more sophisticated. You'd also want to section off your data into what elements that cover the process around how you do things, and the content, so there's facts and discussion and descriptions that will provide insight to your model. I'm gonna have to skip these in the interest of time. But basically, there are things about the steps you take in order to arrive at insight, and then there are documents which give specific information to the model, and you can insert these as separate sections into your prompt in order to convey that, like, here's how you will arrive at the insight, and here's the information you'll use in order to arrive at the insight. So process and content kind of divide. Another principle that I adhere to is garbage in, garbage out. So the writing style and informative of your data set will impart the writing style and informativeness of the generated output. So you'd want to be picky and make sure. Sorry, one sec. Sorry about that.
Technological disruption.
I know, right? It's my son's cell phone. He left it in the office. And yeah, because of course he did. This doesn't only come to like the quality of your content, but also the format. So if most of your information is in bullet points, your model will start outputting bullet points, even if you explicitly tell it not to do so, because because of just how models operate. They're kind of like still on the most basic principle, still a very sophisticated type of autocomplete, and they will complete the methodology that they have seen repeatedly. So if it's just jokes coming in, or if it's a very serious tone coming in, it's going to be a very serious tone coming out. And that is a good thing to keep in mind when working through your content. If the content is not in the style that you intended to, it's good to send it to an LLM and have it repurpose that information, reformat it in the way that you want the model's content to be coming out. Another element is repetition of key concepts and what is important to the user. So there's good type of repetition and bad type of repetition. And the reason for that is the way models are built and the way RAG operates. What RAG does is it creates conceptual clusters out of content, and you'd want the clusters of concepts that are important to your user to be rich, to be a lot of information around them. So that way the model can pick and choose out of a rich pool of information what is most relevant to the user. Bad repetition is when you have duplicates, because that's just, again, bad use of information real estate, but especially bad if you have duplicated data documents in there, and you update one and you don't update the other, because now the model will likely pull both of those documents when the user requests information on that specific subject matter, and as a result, it'll just be misguided, misinformed. It'll be really hard to understand why it's hallucinating in that specific use case. So it's a great idea to just go through your database and delete any duplicates or any outdated information. Which comes to our third point, is that RAG doesn't really have, and at least not in its traditional sense, doesn't have any way to identify different time periods or identify different levels of importance. So it'll be really hard for it to understand the sense of before and after, simply because it's only getting chunks and snippets out of your documents. So if your document is titled "This happened in year X," and then afterwards that happened something else, it's not going to get any of those titles. It's going to get only snippets of information, and that could really throw a wrench in your engine in the generative process. And so what you want to do is, there are technical ways in order to address this and kind of change the weights and the likelihood that it'll return to a specific document in responding to a user's needs, but that gets very technical. Best way to do it is to just delete any information that provides historic context or is just outdated. And likewise for levels of importance, you'd want to only pick information that is directly relevant to the user needs, and not include documents which might be very tertiary or kind of inconsequential to what your target audience is looking for, because you're just confuse the model and pollute your data set with unnecessary content. So the other part is you want to make sure your content, you own the actual content that you're working with, because otherwise, well, I guess you'll just know what Sam Altman feels like with all those countless lawsuits he's facing about appropriating data. But in all seriousness, the likelihood that somebody will take small issue with your small scale application and send a cease and desist notice is very small. But it's just not going to look good, and it's very different from like web scraping or having an AI doing web research, because a RAG tool, it's implied that it's working through your proprietary data and providing something that is not generally available online. And the last recommendations is format does matter. What format the information that it gets fed into a RAG tool does have influence on how well that RAG tool operates and how the quality of that information is. So video transcripts work very well, even though they have no periods and there's no commas, and it's kind of like it gets fed as a string of information. Despite that, models are really good at working with this kind of dirty information. What they're not good at is working with PDFs. So if it's kind of like, I want to almost like put a public service announcement, just avoid PDFs if you can. PDFs look like a convenient and modifiable text file to your human eyes, but the computer, it's an image file. So it's even worse than than simple text, because it is clogged with unrelated metadata, and the model has to use a specific software called an OCR, which looks at an image, tries to transcribe what it sees in the image into a text string, and then with lossiness and misrepresentations and everything involved. But also, that image likely has a bunch of metadata that you don't see, but computers see, clogged into it, and that metadata will all likewise pollute your retrieval. So avoid PDFs if you can. If you can't, that's totally fine. They're not going to be like break everything about your RAG. So it's totally fine if that's the only thing you have to work with. Just if you have an alternative version that is not PDF, turn to that. Another issue is tables. So there are special software and tools surfacing. It's kind of very cutting edge in order to work with tables. But if you don't pay extra consideration to tables and use the special methods, what the model sees is just strings of information going left to right. So it'll see this string of column titles, and then it'll have a string of what goes under that column title. It'll have no awareness of where what column these numbers go under, and to what the model will receive in the end is just gibberish. So you'd want to avoid quantitative metrics and tables like these in your vanilla RAG application. So I see that we're running a little bit over time. Thank you for sticking around. Everything that we've covered here, we're going to cover in greater depth in our full course, which, unlike today's sessions, as I said, is actually 50% is actually building what we cover here, and addresses data implementation, not just how we generate content, but also how to enter the user's deeper needs and align in tone and delivery style to your user. Additionally, we cover how to foster collaboration between subject experts in order to really convey your unique cultural methodologies to the model, and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, I would like to say thank you for being here. I'm glad I was able to speak on the matter of data integration, and now is the time to open questions. I'll be here for as long as you want to answer any curiosities or lingering questions you have on the matter, and you can, I'll be sending out a follow-up email with a recording and the link to anyone who signed up, so look out for that. Want to give you permission to exit. Otherwise, feel free to shoot away with whatever questions you have left.
See, Renee in the chat said that they were particularly interested in the use of PDFs and avoiding images because of metadata and using tables, and is interested in other specifics about enterprise data and making it AI ready. The one that comes to mind for me, if you don't mind me starting, Lev, is just that enterprise data is often very fragmented. It's in a bunch of different places. It's like some of it's in a database, some of it's in a SharePoint. So getting it all in one place, wherever that is a great first step. But then in enterprise, we also have to deal with ownership. So understanding what the governance is of that data and how it can be used is also like often a blocker far more than the tech. Renee, if you have specific questions, if you wanted to open up your mic or put it in the chat, you can feel free. But Lev, I don't know if you have any thoughts in the meantime.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, also there's often kind of like security barriers that only surface when you start trying to apply that data to a specific use case. Often it's user data that you thought that it's yours and it's yours to use, but when you start applying it, there's actually legal barriers to you applying it to specific to like an open source or like a public use case or even an internal tool. And so it's great to start thinking of those things now and make sure you own the content that you're going to be using long before you actually start thinking of how to apply it in AI.
We often get in the situation where we get hired by a company and then they want us to do something with a certain set of data. And then we find out that actually getting permission to use that data is going to take several weeks. So then we're stuck kind of waiting. And in those cases, it's great to find some data that's very similar. So like Lev, you were talking about all these different ways that there's stylistic things you'll have to figure out. There's structural things you'll have to figure out. There's like data type things you'll figure out. And so in those cases, if you can find something that's similar, let's say you're dealing with like HR policies, and you can't get permission to use the real HR policies, go online and find some similar HR policies that are open source and start working with those. Then by the time you get the permission to use the real data in the application, you're already farther along and have solved some of the problems with things.
Anyone else got any questions or interesting feedback to the session? All right, great. So Jeremy dropped the link to the course as well as a coupon for a discount, and hope to see you around. We have 2 more lightning lessons on Fridays in the coming weeks, and so please feel free to hop on those. And otherwise, I hope to see you on the internet. Take care, y'all.